Hi everyone, today I'm going to review a different kind of video, which some of you want me to do. It's a true story about 6 boys who were stranded on an island for 15 months.
I am Sione Whakaua. 5 classmates and myself from St Andrews College in Tonga were shipwrecked on this island in June 1965. Ata Island has been taboo for a century since the days when the slave traders took many people away. At first, Ata was not kind to us. Our small boat was broken on the rocks and we were cut and bruised when we came ashore. We lived, but our fights to stay alive was not yet over.
At home, but the seabirds that flew about the castaways contained moisture. They caught the birds in their cliff nests and drank their blood. Without the birds, the Tongans would have died on the rocks.
Yes, exactly. Hydration, electrolytes, blood has every nutrient, literally. It would be pretty much impossible for them to survive without it, and that's how it is in nature. Drinking blood is completely normal. But nowadays, of course, because of religions especially, we see it as demonic. Because of Hollywood, horror movies, we see it as something wrong. Humans are very brainwashed, but in nature, completely normal.
The Ata mountain is 1,000 feet high at its lowest point. For 3 months, we could find no way up. A ledge beneath the mountain became our home. We built stones around it to keep out the sea. We ate fish and birds. There was no fire to cook them.
Raw fish and birds, again, that's what you would eat in nature. That's what's been reported everywhere where modern humans did not influence the people. You see a lot of tribe documentaries nowadays, but then you find out that it's 2 kilometers from a city. Most of the tribe documentaries, especially the ones in Africa, are fake. Not that they are trying to be fake on purpose, it's just not actual humans who live naturally. There's hardly any out there anymore. Ajnes Wonderplanets had traveled to the Philippines. He said that there were people there who lived to 150. The women who were 80 years old, I assume that the men also, looked like the 40-year-old women of our modern society. Think about it. 80-year-olds in nature look like the 40-year-olds that we have in modern society. He said that they almost only ate raw fish and coconuts. These guys also built their own shelter, which again is obviously natural. Yeah.
We were most unhappy here. We thought that soon a big sea would come and carry us away.
Yeah, they almost died, essentially, just because of the water and nowhere to go. Obviously, for them it was also sort of a shock to have these kind of conditions all of a sudden. Realistically, it was probably also hard to catch the fish and the birds. They were probably just surviving.
We tried always to find a way up the mountain, but we could not.
But they never stopped trying to find a way. Time and again during the 3 months on the rocks, the castaways climbed partway up the inhospitable mountainside, only to be beaten back. Eventually, 100 days after landing on the rocks, they found what they believed could be a way up.
100 days later, they only found a way up. And these stupid people in my comments always say, yeah, but people in nature hike. They go up mountains even. No, that has never been reported. The only reason people would ever do that is because in situations like this, when you believe that you're going to die and you have to get out of that specific situation, as in get away from the coast and find something else, try to find some kind of life or anything. They didn't know where they are. You would never do that just like that. There would always be a very specific reason. And most importantly, you didn't like to do it. They didn't want to do that. They were probably insanely exhausted, but they just had to survive. So you do that for survival, which ages your body. It doesn't ever mean that you ever want to do it or that people ever hiked or anything like that on purpose.
The climb took 2 days. Several times they had to turn back and find another way. But eventually, they came to a coconut grove 800 feet above the rocks. Here, they rested and regained the strength for the final effort to get to the top.
In a ledge at this halfway point up the mountain, we found old-fashioned knives. We cut the tops off young coconuts and drank the juice.
That must have been so amazing after climbing for so long. Blood is very hydrating, but coconut water also has a lot of electrolytes. It's also very good after such stress.
We felt we had the spirit of the old people with us. For the first time since we landed here 3 months before, we were happy. We had the will and the strength to go on.
Before reaching the top, they had to call on all their reserves. But hand over hand, and at times inch by inch, they clawed their way up. Eventually, they did reach the top. This was almost another world. Gone was the savagery of nature below. Here they found a quiet...
In this reenactment, it's a lot easier for them to climb, obviously, because there's a rope. It's a typical hiking trail. Whereas in nature, there's deep forests. You can't simply go through them. There's insects, plants that will cut you. People have this absolute delusion that people just used to hike just like that. You can't simply do that in nature. Nobody would actually even risk their lives. If, then you would do that for survival. If you had absolutely no food left or there was some kind of catastrophe going on, you would then actually risk your life in a group, not alone, and go do that. You can't go and drive outside of the city 20 minutes and go for your hike. That's not how actual real nature looks like.
Friendly place, almost a Shangri-La. Quiet breezes, birds, pineapples, pawpaw, bananas. Reaching the top had been well worthwhile. After the battle of 3 months below, they were happy to accept this quiet gift of nature.
First, a fire. We had no matches, but we hungered for warm food. Steveni remembered the old way of making a flame. It took many hours, but eventually we did have a fire. But from this day onward, it was never left unattended.
Yeah, it took many hours, and that's only because they learned how to do it. Humans in nature don't even know what fire is. They would never try to do that. I don't know what the temperature there was. Maybe it was also cold. But I assume that they did this because they grew up with cooking and fire. And humans simply do what they are used to doing. They get brainwashed in a sense.
That first meal on the crest of the mountain was a banquet. They prepared green bananas, wild beans, fish. They had a tortoise from below and wild birds from the cliffs. Never was there such a meal.
This is interesting because they knew that they can eat the birds raw. Obviously, they did it for months, but they still cooked it now just because they are so used to it. Of course, it would be a lot easier for them to survive because they would be getting a lot more nutrients out of the raw meat. The feeling of familiarity is very important for humans. The way you grow up is completely going to shape your life.
But at that time of physical conquest, they said to each other, "We are here through the grace of God." And before eating, they thanked him in prayer and song.
The beans and possibly the green bananas also, they had to cook though. Obviously you can't eat raw beans, you would die, they understood that. And green bananas, yeah, you would have to cook them too. It was just the combination of having to cook those plant foods, possibly the tortoise also. I don't know how you would really eat it raw. I've seen some other tribes also cook tortoises. I've never seen any really eat them raw, and that's probably because of the shell. It's all of that and the familiarity of cooking that made them cook the birds also with the rest. It makes sense. Oh my God,
From my father's teaching, I remembered a way to obtain water. There are trees on the island that have water in their trunks. With wooden stakes and rough knives, it takes 4 days to dig deep. But then, drip by drip,
Nobody would know anything like this nowadays. No father teaches their children something like this. They actually somewhat knew how to survive.
We have water.
Next, they made a house, a folly of palms and bushes. Then they were able to move the precious fire inside. Each night, as the flames died down, hordes of rats moved into the warmth. But beneath their crude blankets, the boys ignored them.
Each day, we hoped to eat 2 birds each for our meal. Mano came back to the top with his catch, and Steveni decided to go further down the cliff face where there were more nests. Then he slipped and fell. We found him on a narrow ledge 40 feet below. His leg was broken.
They treated the injury in Tongan fashion with hot coconut fronds. After 4 months, a scar remained, but he could walk. From a cliff-front lookout, they retained a constant vigil. At dawn and dusk, they heard roosters crowing. Somehow, almost miraculously, descendants of the fowls kept by the old people a century ago had survived. They found hen eggs which were good to eat, but the wily fowls at first were too elusive to be caught.
Raw eggs, of course. How would you cook them? Even if they wanted to, there would be no way. You would need a pan or something. No, of course you would eat them raw. Those are as pure and natural as you can get. It would be completely impossible to get food poisoning from them.
After 6 months, it seemed they had been on Ata for an eternity. About this time, back on the home islands, relatives were holding funeral services for them. But sad and unhappy as they were, the castaways were physically strong. They retained their inbred faith in the Almighty, and their will to live never flagged. A rough trap was used to catch the fowls, but the wild birds remained their staple diet. Running the fowls down by foot at night became a sport as well as a necessity for living. Eventually, 200 of the hardy game fowls were penned in hutches at the main camp.
Yeah, those kind of animals you could actually catch. Those would be some of the few that a human being can catch.
They were fed on coconut and other scraps. The fowls were eaten only when the storms were too severe for the castaways to obtain birds from the cliffside. Then, one day, an event that they could scarcely believe. From the lookout, they heard the cry, "Boat coming! Boat coming!" The Australian trawler Just David was searching for new crayfish grounds. Had owner Peter Warner not decided to spend the night off Ata, the castaways almost certainly would still be there. For the first time in 15 months, the Tongans were again in touch with the sight and sound of civilization. They were given new clothes and a meal of beef and rice. And as the day ended, they remembered that their prayers had been answered, and they said, "Thank you, God."
This was an interesting story. I'm glad that it ended well for them. It did not end so good for other people who were in situations like this, and that's because they generally didn't know how to survive and hunt. Even though we have this natural survival instinct, if you don't learn anything at all from your family, it's going to be pretty hard. They also generally sometimes just ran out of food, and that's why they ended up eating each other. Of course, some people still survived. In this case, all of them survived, and that's because one of them knew how to get water. Maybe the others learned how to fish from their fathers, brothers, some family members. That used to be normal. It's so messed up nowadays. They generally understood how to survive. Most wouldn't survive, especially in such an environment, for so long. It was very mountainous. It's not easy. That being said, I would like to live a life like that over the life I have now, watching videos, commenting on them, reviewing them. What I just saw there looked so much more fun because it's natural. Nature is just 100 times better than the lives that we live nowadays. Yes, how I wish. Thanks for watching.